Hi, my friends. Welcome to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, your host, and also an indie author. I'm thrilled you're joining me today for another fun interview with a passionate author. We're going to kick off this show with an exciting reading, so let's get started.
Hello, my name is Brandon Dragan. I'm the author of the novel The Wages of Grace. Wanted to start out by reading a little clip from the novel. He could taste salt on his tongue as the waves broke around him. Whether the gentle flavor lingered because of the misty spray or the tender touch of her lips, he could not be sure. He sat wrapped in a wool blanket, the sun bright through hazy clouds, the ocean pulsing in perfect rhythm. His feet planted in the cold, wet sand, he had never been more happy. She floated effortlessly over the waves as far as the moon and as close as his heartbeat. Her soft, rosy lips nearly touched his ear as he gently bit his bottom lip. She softly whispered his name. Her beauty was ravishing, and she didn't even know it. Delicate strands of perfect, ash-brown hair fell smoothly over her bare, freckled shoulders. He would have tied a millstone around his neck and plunged himself into the sea for just one more kiss. In the next instant, there were rocks below, jagged and sharp. He stood 40 feet above the edge of the precipice, while the rough sea crashed spectacularly against the boulders below. Birds picked ruthlessly at the carcasses of dead fish, unwilling to leave them mercifully to their eternal rest. The tips of the rocks gleamed in the gray sunlight, the raging sea roaring against them deafeningly. He closed his eyes and imagined flinging himself toward them, but he knew from previous experience that he would only wake again in his bed, dejected but unharmed. He recoiled in surprise when he heard his name again. He looked up and saw her in the distance, flowing white dress whipping in the wind. She stood erect at sea, his very own Venus beckoning him. Tears streamed down his wind-beaten face as he stretched his arms toward her, but the distance between them was impassable. His old muscles cramped with longing for just one more touch, one more embrace, one more tender word. The rain began to fall heavily as it always did, and the wind began to howl as he was certain it would, and he knew that once more he had to say goodbye. Too great, however, was the disquiet of his soul to utter mere words. Slowly, silently, she began to sink. He watched for the 1000th time in horror, unable to intervene. He also knew that she would return the following night, and that the aching in his soul would never dissipate, would never relent. It has been said that time heals all wounds, but this is untrue. Some wounds only turn gangrenous with time. There was unremitting sorrow in this subconscious nightly ritual, but there was also the numbing consolation that at least he had seen her again, in all her glory. His eyelids fluttered rapidly in the dark as his mind's eye watched her calmly submerge in the black, foaming sea. He told her that he loved her, and that was all. She sank to her waist, her breasts, her neck, her nose, and her eyes without panic, without struggle or fear. Then he could see her no more. Her name was Hope.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inside the Minds of Authors. I am so excited we have the talented Mr. Brandon with us today. Hi, how are you today?
I am doing great. How are you?
I am wonderful. I am so excited to have you with us, and I'm ready to jump right into this book because you had me all, I'm like, oh, wow, this is so exciting. And then you go, her name is Hope, and I was like, ooh, I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I am excited to have you here. Tell us, what is this book about? So let's just get started.
Sure. The book it's called The Wages of Grace. Really the story of two brothers that grew up impoverished to immigrant parents. They lost both of their parents when they were young, grew up in the middle of the Great Depression. The younger brother fell in love with a girl through his, I guess from middle school on. I mean, his young teenage years, they were kind of the storybook romance that you hear about, just the love at first sight kind of puppy love that matured into important relationship. They got engaged just as he was going to fight in the Second World War. And while he was in Europe behind enemy lines, she died in suspect circumstances. And when he came home from the war, he learned that his older brother was the last person that was seen with her. And the older brother was not very forthcoming about what happened. And so some suspicions grew, and it really just tells the story of these two brothers that grow apart over this, that grow apart over a grudge and suspicions and this break in the relationship between them. And then ultimately they come back in their old age with the older brother is destitute and dying, and he has no one else to turn to. And so he shows up on the younger brother's door, and it just becomes a question of, can you forgive after all those years? And by that point, they're old men already. So, yeah, it's really just wrestling with those questions of how long are you willing to carry a grudge, and ultimately who pays the price of carrying a grudge as opposed to forgiveness.
That is deep and is so appropriate. I know people that carry grudges for 30 years, and I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
remember what I did 30 minutes ago. What are
I
you
know.
doing here?
I know. Yeah, I know some of those people too. And the thing that really got me thinking about it, just in terms of that, was, when you carry the weight of that, you often think that if somebody wronged you, did something that hurt you, you often think, okay, if I keep this going, then they're really going to know. They're really going to pay for what they did. And then, like you said, it turns out 20, 30 years later that you've been the one carrying this around the whole time. That's kind of the premise of, I guess, the overall theme of the
What inspired this story? Because this can get very personal very quickly,
novel.
and it can be very distant at the same time. What inspired you
Sure.
to write this?
Oddly enough, so I grew up in northeastern New Jersey and got into music, writing songs, that kind of thing. Always had a creative streak in me. I came to Nashville, Tennessee to attend Belmont University. They have a really cool music business program, and that's what I thought that I wanted to do for a long time. And then I met my wife, who was from this area. We got married young, and the music business just became something I didn't really want to devote my life to. And so I was just working some regular jobs, and I guess the creative part of me was repressed for a few years, and all of a sudden this just came out. Previous to writing this novel, I'd never written anything more than a 5-minute song. So I mean, this was a brand new endeavor for me. And actually I started writing it about 11 years ago. And I was working for a company that sold wedding rings. I was a territory manager. I had 5 enormous states, and so I was driving constantly and was on the way home on a trip, on the way home back to Nashville. And this idea of these two brothers fighting over this one girl, she dies, who's to blame? That was like the birth of it. And I had to pull over into a gas station and I was like scribbling notes furiously. And then, yeah, I started working on it. At that time, I didn't even have a computer. And so, like, I was typing it in the hotel, like business centers in the hotels I was staying in, and then emailing it to myself. And so it was a really long process. I ended up locking myself out of it by password protecting it at one point, and I just walked away from it for so long that I forgot the password, like an idiot. So I rewrote it. Initially was going to self-publish it, had it done for a couple years, and then the opportunity came along to publish it through Publisher Choir. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of just the genesis of it. But the time period starts and ends, I suppose, with the two main characters as older men in the early 1990s. But the main portion of the story takes place in the 30s and 40s and maybe early 50s. And I think a big part of that was my grandparents on both sides of my family. I was very close with. They all lived through the Second World War, through the Depression. And I think for me, it was partly after losing them, it was partly an exploration of what it would have been like to be young at that time. For me, it was a little bit of a personal quest. And actually, my grandparents on my dad's side make a fictional appearance in the novel for a brief moment. So, yeah, so that part of it was definitely very personal to me.
How much research did you have to do? Because you're taking us back in time.
Yeah. Fortunately for me, I'm a bit of a history nerd to begin with. If you might be able to see some of the books behind me. So, well, I guess if we're podcasting here, I know you and I are on Zoom. I'm a bit of a history nerd. There definitely was research that went into it. I try to be as honest as I am real in what I write. And so I wanted it to be factual as far as possible. So, I mean, I did some research on the K rations in the army at the time, what the soldiers were eating, all those kinds of things. That was a fun bit too. I enjoyed that part immensely. And my grandfather, too, was definitely a car guy. So I did some research on a lot of the cars that are in the book. And there, I'm not particularly a car guy, but there are some special models that make appearances here and there. So
I'm so enjoying the fact that you have taken this book on a journey and as a tribute to your family, which is beautiful.
thank you.
It's a way of wrapping it all and being honest and authentic to that time period while still creating this beautiful universe. So, is this a standalone book or you're thinking of doing anything more with these characters?
I would probably say this one is a standalone. I pretty much cover from the time the main characters are born till near death. And so there's not a whole lot more. I mean, there's a little bit of a gap in between. It's not like 1200 page diary or anything like that. I think I said everything that these characters wanted to say.
There is nothing wrong with stand-up. I'm definitely
Yeah,
a series kind of girl, but you need a
sure,
standalone kind of book. And I know people
sure,
that that's all they want to read. They don't want to commit to any more of their lives to
sure.
anybody else. It's a very beautiful thing as long as the story covers everything. When you were writing this, what genre were you thinking of?
I didn't really know. And I guess I still don't know. I mean, people ask me, and I feel like more than anything, maybe it's historical fiction, it's literary fiction. It just kind of came out the way it came out. And for me, the biggest thing in my writing is, like I said, I strive to be honest with myself. And I truly believe in the idea of not judging your characters from the standpoint of sometimes characters will do reprehensible things. Sometimes they will do things that you don't understand. Just put it down on paper because you might come back to it 6 months down the road and think, oh, that makes so much more sense now. Or what's scary is you'll start to see where that came from inside of you in that character and you're like, "Oh, that's kind of ugly. I didn't realize that was there." So I try to go with that. But yeah, it's definitely history focused from a standpoint of it's just time period based, but the introduction that I read is probably the most poetic part of it in terms of language. It's not quite that descriptive throughout the whole thing. There's a lot more dialogue and that kind of thing, but I just tried to write something that I would want to read. And so I tried to keep it paced. I tried to keep the characters, like I said, just doing what they do.
It is a journey in somebody's life, and it is a journey
Yeah,
on where they're coming from and where they're going. So I enjoy the fact
for
that you said
sure.
you found pieces of yourself because there's always pieces of yourself when you write.
Yeah, even in characters that I don't like. That was the funny thing to realize because I started out very much, there's the main character, he's kind of the good guy and you're rooting for him. But then like in his really dark moments, I started to see myself and then even in the characters that I didn't like in some of that, I was like, yeah, I know where that came from. And like I said, sometimes I didn't realize it until, a year later. But also, there were things that the characters did that surprised me that I didn't make like a psychological connection with myself, but later on, or in going back and reading the whole thing, it was like, oh yeah, I could see that coming, and I didn't see it when I was writing it. So I just try to be honest to what the story is telling me.
There's a piece of us in all those things. I usually joke like some of my side characters are some of the most enjoyable,
Oh
just
yeah,
because
yeah,
they do and say what they want, and you're going, "Ooh, that's gonna hurt." Thanks.
yeah, exactly.
Like the fact that you're looking at a historical fiction. You're
Sure.
going to a place, you're looking at it, you're analyzing, and you're bringing this into that life, which is very exciting. So anybody that likes historical fiction is really going to enjoy it. But did you had an audience in mind?
To be honest, like I said, when I was writing it, it was such a struggle because I had never attempted anything this long. I was also finishing my college degree, like having children and working full time through the whole process. So it
Oh my
was really, yeah, it was a labor of
God.
love from the standpoint of I gave up on it so many times thinking nobody's going to read this. Forget like having an audience in mind. Nobody's going to want to read this. But there was something inside me that just said, you know what? Like, this is a story worth telling. It's a redemptive story that we need in our world today about people who are able to come back together and deal with their own problems in terms of moving on. Yeah, I didn't have an audience in mind, and I guess I still don't. It was something that I would want to read, which, I'm into historical fiction. I'm into character driven books. And so that was really what came out of it.
So we're going to dig a little bit into this whole motivation and time management. Let's be honest
Sure.
about this because you're looking at a combination of full-time job, husband, parent, student, and I'm going to write a novel. How did you balance all that? And when did you decided, because we all want to quit. At some point in time, you're like, this is more than I can handle. When did you make the decision like, no, I'm doing this. This is going to happen.
I think it was probably maybe like 4 years into writing it. And I was actually at a conference with another author that I really like. It was his conference. I wasn't like speaking or anything there. And he made the point of if you're a creative person, whatever's trying to come out of you is something that the world needs. Like somebody needs this. And so don't don't cheat the rest of us by giving up on it because of your own self-doubt or your own lack of time. And so I just kept at it little by little. My wife was kind enough to at one point let me like get a cabin in the woods for 3 days. And so I mean, I think I probably wrote 30,000 words in 3 days. I just stayed with it, and little by little, as a creative person, I experience a tremendous amount of self-doubt, just those voices in my head that are telling me you're not good at this. Why are you doing this? This is insane. And realizing that, I guess the more pushback you have, the more it might be worth finishing whatever it is. And so I just got comfortable with this is something I need to do. It's something I want to do. I believe in it. Whether it ever sells a single copy or anybody ever reads it, it's just something that I need to try to do. That was kind of how I approached it. And like I said, from when the idea hit my head to publication was about 11 and a half years.
You found your own internal drive and your own motivation to keep going, regardless of what the demons were saying. That's what I'm calling it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because they all come at the most inappropriate time.
Yeah,
And we all have that imposter syndrome where we're convinced if they figured out who we really are, they're going to kick us out of the village.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm not sure who's in this village, but we're convinced we're
Yeah.
all going to get
Yeah.
kicked out.
Absolutely. I have a friend who, a good friend who always says that when you find yourself, in your own head, you're behind enemy lines. So I thought that was, it's like,
That's,
yeah, very true.
oh my God, that is so perfect and so accurate. We go down those rabbit holes and we can get lost there.
Yeah.
And then trying to come out is just as bad as trying to let your characters not be themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're never going to win.
Yep. Absolutely.
When you decided to, okay, I got this book finished. I could self-publish. I can go ahead traditional. How was your transition to going from book is finished to getting a publisher? How did that work?
Yeah. I mean, that actually took a few years as well, and did not happen the way I expected it at all. So I met a guy that he ended up becoming a really good friend, that he's an illustrator. He's based in Nashville. His name's Derek Hobbs. So I had asked him about helping me with the cover layout and that kind of thing. From the point I had this novel finished and was going through edits on it, I actually wrote and self published a couple short stories as well. He helped me with the cover art for the second short story just to kind of get a feel for how we were going to work through this. And then we worked on the cover for a long time. He was extremely busy as well. So we just kind of went through it. And then the goal was always to try to self publish it. But I am not a marketer. I'm not like a salesman. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be comfortable trying to push this out myself, and especially to all my poor friends on Facebook, that I'd be constantly selling this to. I did video production for a while with a friend of mine, and so I've got a bit of a background in that. So I was working on editing a trailer for the book, and I sent it to another friend of mine out in California, and he is a published author with Choir, this publisher. And I sent him the video. He was like, "This looks incredible. You need to talk with our publisher." And so he kind of set that up for me. I told the publisher what it was about. He said, "That sounds right up our alley." One of the things that's really nice about Choir is that they kind of walk that line between, like, they give you the benefits of a traditional publisher while you retain the benefits of self-publishing. So you really get to drive the messaging, you retain creative control, and then they help kind of with the things that you're not comfortable with. And so for me, that was a really good fit because creative control is important to me. I don't want to sound like a total diva, but as an artist, as a writer, I didn't want a team of 20 people hacking what I meant to say into something that I didn't recognize. Yeah, so that all happened very quickly. I'm also in my second year of law school, and we were like, let's drop this book in the middle of a semester. And I was like, okay. And so we did that too. Just like, this is my life, you know?
Glad when you commit, it's all in. I'm gonna commit and life is happening, a lot of it, but we're gonna go
Yeah.
ahead and do it. So
Yeah.
I'm excited. Why not?
Thanks. Yeah.
If you're gonna do it, go do it. I love it.
Absolutely.
What is the one lesson you have learned in this process about writing?
Oh, there are so many. I think the biggest thing for me is just to finish it and make it the best that you can be. You will always have regrets, particularly like this book. As I said, it's been a long time in the making. And so the beginning parts of the novel, were written when I was essentially a different person. I mean, it was a decade ago. And so there are things that I would do differently. But at the same time, every time I went back to read it, it was something that I came away with like, oh yeah, like I like this. I might have done some things differently, but it's good. And this is the kind of thing that I would want to read, and it's honest and it's real. And so that for me, I think is the biggest thing. If you tinker, I mean, editing is important, but if you tinker with something to the point that you have robbed it of its humanity, I mean, that's everything. You're losing the human element, and that's what draws people to fiction. That's what draws people to stories. As long as the human race has been around, that's what's drawn us to. You think back to the cavemen sitting around the fire, like telling stories. That's where it's at. And so, I guess the biggest lesson for me again was to be kind to myself and just let it be what it was at the end of the day. Put the work in, but then kind of walk away. Another piece of great advice that I actually got from a law school professor was never read something you've written once it's in print because you'll always find things that you don't like about it.
It's an amazing advice and very, very accurate because you always go
Yeah.
and I don't know about that. I'm doing audiobooks now, so I'm getting to
Oh,
listen
yeah.
to my words, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I would have done it that way
Yeah. Yeah.
now.
It sounded different in my head than it did out loud.
I learned that with my editor because she's like, I don't get it. And then I was like, I thought it was really funny when I wrote it. She's
Right.
like, I mean, not as funny anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you working on now? Besides law school, are you working on another writing project?
I absolutely am. It's a matter of finding some time. So the next one, it's actually another novel. It's completely drafted. So we're just starting kind of the editing process. And my wife is a huge Jane Austen Pride and Prejudice fan.
Ooh.
And so, kind of a funny story, if you're familiar with that story at all. So, she's a really big fan of the Colin Firth 1995 BBC Pride and Prejudice miniseries. That's like the gospel to her. I have always had a hard time with the probably underlying assumption that if she ever met Colin Firth, we might not be married anymore.
You're not dealing with a celebrity crush very well, no.
So I have always joked and tried to throw Mr. Darcy under the bus as much as possible. About 3 years ago, we were planning to leave for England. Two of us were going to get away for a couple weeks, and we had some friends in England. And I'm a huge Arsenal soccer fan. So we were going to see a couple matches. And, I think we were like packing. And we got on the subject because one of her good friends in England writes Pride and Prejudice fan fiction. Incredible writer. Her name's Joanna Starnes. And so I was joking with my wife that, well, Mr. Darcy's not actually the hero of the story. It's Mr. Bingley, because he's actually this like Dexter style avenging serial killer. And that's what the people who've read Pride and Prejudice didn't know. We get to England and she tells her friend this person who writes like really serious, and she just like died hysterically laughing. And she was like, Brandon, you've got to do it. And so oddly enough, I hurt my back that next year and had some time. And so while I was down, I just wrote this thing. I did my best to pay homage to Jane Austen and her incredible book. And so it's a serious novel. It's not like a jokey thing, but there's that. And then I've got a couple that are in the pipeline that when I can find some time to work on them, I will.
I'm excited that you got bitten by the writing bug, because now it has become a part of you.
For sure. Okay. Yeah.
This is a part of who you are now.
Definitely.
It is just fitting it into a bubble. So once
Exactly.
you commit to 11 years of your life to a book, you're officially in. This is part of who you are.
And I'm sure I'll have plenty of time when I start practicing law.
Oh yeah, I can see this happening right now. I'm like, time is just going to free itself up completely. So yes. But you have become really good at managing the pieces you have. So I'm expecting more books from you.
Thank you. The writing has become something I absolutely love, and I look forward to the chance to do it. So yeah, I have no idea on that Pride and Prejudice idea. I have no idea when that will happen, but it's something I'm talking to the publisher about, and we're kind of going from there. So
it's going to be exciting. The best part about once you start practicing, you're going to have lots of stories to pull from.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
You're going to have material that you're like, I don't even know how much I can put in this. Like, this is
exactly.
what I need. So tell us, where can our listeners find you? Where can we find the book? Where can we learn more about you? How do we get a hold of you?
Sure. My website is brandondragan.com. You can find The Wages of Grace on Amazon. It's also at thewagesofgrace.com, all the places where it's available. So you can get it on whatever your favorite e-reader is, or if you have particular bookstores that you like. My social media on Facebook, I am Brandon Dragan Author. And then on Instagram, Brandon Dragan Official. That's about it.
It is all very consistent. We can find you everywhere. Our listeners can enjoy it.
Try to make that easy. Yeah.
That is pretty easy. We can definitely find you. They'll be able to look it up, figure it out, get a taste of it, because I am excited. So we're going to switch gears a little.
Okay.
So we have learned a lot about how much you enjoy to torture yourself with multiple projects at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm like, didn't see that one coming. It has been so much fun, but we're going to move to our lightning round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
These are easy and fun. Please don't think too hard on them. So let's get going.
All right.
Pepsi or Coke?
Coke.
That was pretty quick. Okay.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy one.
They're simple. Pancakes or waffles?
Both. It depends on the morning.
I like that answer. Wizard or knight?
Night.
Okay. I think you're my first person that actually went in that. I get more wizards when we play, but okay. Scary movie or comedy?
Oh, it depends on the mood. Usually comedy, but if it's a legit scare, like if it's like The Shining, I might have to go that way. I'm a big Kubrick fan, so.
You can definitely go either way.
Yeah.
Usually, like, that's pretty impressive. I'll give you that one. I'm going to make this a little harder. Let's see how you do.
Okay.
If you could meet one person, famous person, dead or alive, who will you meet?
Oh, man. Just off the top of my head, Noel Gallagher, the brains behind the band Oasis.
Why?
I'm just a huge fan of that band, and I think he's one of the funniest people and most brilliant people on the planet. So I'd love to go watch a football game in England with him.
I like. So here's our last one. Let's see how you do.
Okay.
You could be any superhero. Who would you pick?
Probably Superman. I mean, the whole bullets bouncing off me thing. I mean, I guess that's pretty appealing. I don't live in a particularly dangerous neighborhood or anything, but you never know.
Comes in handy regardless where you're at.
And flying would be nice too, especially we're all kind of grounded with COVID, so it'd be nice to be able to just take off on your own.
I was thinking of the whole leaping buildings category. I was like, that
Yeah.
could be kind of fun. Brandon, it has been such a pleasure. Do you have any closing remarks for us?
I am just super thankful for you having me on. This has been a lot of fun. I hope that your listeners will at least check out the book. I'd be super grateful for that. Like, I am a dad and a student and all those kinds of things. So everybody that picks up the book, it means a lot to me. But yeah, if you're a creator out there, if you're a writer, I would just say keep going. If it takes you 10 years, it takes you 10 years. And you know what? If 10 years from now, you can either have a book or not. And so you might as well have a book when you're done with it.
Ooh, those are powerful words. At the end of the day, time's going to fly. So
Yeah.
make the best of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sir, it's been a pleasure and so much fun. And I'm sure our listeners have loved it. So please go ahead, check out the website, check out the book, and give this podcast a like, share it, give us a review, invite people to join us. We're thrilled to have you here and come back next week for another exciting episode of Inside the Minds of Authors. Thanks, everyone.